Now part of the Darkcast Network. Welcome to Indie Podcasts with a dark side. A daughter murders her parents and lives with their bodies for 4 years before being caught. Quote, cheer up, at least you've caught the bad guy. This is what she tells police when she is finally caught. Today, I tell you the case of Virginia McCullough, right now on Love and Murder. Welcome, lambs. Welcome to Love and Murder, Heartbreak to Homicide. I am your host, Kai, and if you're new here, I tell you cases of relationships that turn to homicide. Why don't you take a seat, take a listen all the way to the end, and if you like it, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss any more true crime cases. If you're a returning lamb, thank you as always for your continued support. In today's episode, I'm telling you a case of a woman who got away with murdering her parents for 4 years and lived in the house with their bodies, and nobody was the wiser. So we'll go into how she got away with this. However, before we get into that, I want to say thank you to our sponsors, which is our Lamb Patreons, patreon.com/Love and Murder. If you want to be a sponsor of Love and Murder, then head on over to Patreon, choose whatever tier has the bonuses that you want to sign up for, and you can be a sponsor of Love and Murder. If you're not ready to be a sponsor yet, you could also sign up to the Patreon for free, and you do get some benefits of signing up to the Patreon for free. Patreon.com/Love and Murder. Actually, one of the bonus episodes that we had come out last week was of a cold case of 30 years where police had found a newborn murdered in a trash can, and for 30 years they had no idea who did it. So we went into that case. So that's part of the benefits of becoming a sponsor of Love and Murder. You do get bonus episodes, you do get bonus Kyrans, depending on the tier that you choose. But like I said, if you're not ready, you can always sign up to the Patreon for free, and you still get a couple benefits just by doing that. Patreon.com/Love and Murder. Now that we got all that housekeeping out of the way, grab your butts, grab a delicious glass of apple juice, and you know my favorite apple juice comes from BJ's, murderandlove.com/BJ's, where if you use my link, you save $35 off your first year's membership. And let's now get into some Love and Murder. John and Lois McCullough lived in Great Battle, Essex, which is a quiet neighborhood in England. John, who was 70 years old, was a retired business studies lecturer with a passion for education and writing. Lois, who was 71 years old, was a homemaker who loved history and exchanging letters with pen pals. Their youngest daughter, Virginia McCullough, was described as socially awkward by her sisters with a long history of compulsive lying. She had never been financially independent and was entirely dependent on her parents for support as she was unemployed. Virginia, who was 36 years old at the time of this case, was the youngest of 5 daughters. Unlike her sisters, who had moved out, Virginia continued to live with her parents rent-free. Now, my stance on that is unless you have a reason to be living here rent-free, like I'm not just going to kick you out, but unless you have a reason to be living here rent-free, no, we don't live here rent-free and kick up our feet and think that our parents are just going to take care of us until the day we die. So absolutely not. At 36 years old, she's just chilling. She had actually not worked since 2017 when she worked as a barmaid, which her parents didn't know because she pretended to her parents that she was a salaried web designer, and she would actually go out to a fake office to keep up that pretense. She also told her parents she was studying to become an artist, claiming that this would be financially rewarding for the family. So the people who lived around them would describe Virginia as, quote, quite chatty and, quote, a little bit odd. A neighbor said she would, quote, always come and descend on you, and she was slightly irrational with her thinking. So when they said she would always come and descend on you, have you ever met one of those people who you're minding your business and they just come out of nowhere and just start talking to you about their entire life, and you would just like, all I said was hi. You know, that's what that means. Virginia claimed to suffer from complex medical issues, including horrible migraines, which, by the way, no one ever witnessed. But if you're someone who has a migraine, you know you can't control it and it comes on whenever. So at least one person in your life would have witnessed you having a migraine. In Virginia's case, nobody ever witnessed her having a migraine. She also lied to her doctor, saying that she was pregnant and had miscarried. And she also told them that she had benign cysts that required treatment. To which my question is, how did you diagnose that? Now, John and Lois relied heavily on Virginia as they got older and their health declined. John suffered from hypertension, type 2 diabetes, and glaucoma, while Lois suffered from agoraphobia and obsessive compulsive disorder. So I guess that's how you would rationalize her living at home, rent-free, because they depended on her to take care of them. So literally, she's working. If you're taking care of both your older father and your older mother full-time, you literally don't have time for a full-time job. So I could see why she got away with living there rent-free. Now, by March of 2019, Virginia had started planning the murder of her parents. She had started accumulating prescription drugs, and she bought a knife, and she also worked on testing out different methods of poisoning. She experimented with small doses of crushed medicine, using her father as a, quote, guinea pig in the days leading up to his murder. So that was in March, and by June 17, that's when she decided to execute her plan. John was poisoned first. She mixed a lethal cocktail of crushed prescription medicine and mixed that into his Guinness, his red wine, and his brandy. Damn, that was all he drank in a day? I'm not saying that's all he drank, but he drank Guinness, red wine, and brandy all in a day. By the following morning, he was dead. Lois was next. She was lying in bed listening to the radio when Virginia attacked her. First, she smashed her in the head with a hammer, and then she stabbed her 8 times. 7 of those times were in the chest. After ensuring both of her parents were dead, Virginia immediately started her plan of covering it up. She built a, quote, homemade mausoleum for John's body, and she put him in there. That mausoleum was built with masonry blocks, and it was done in his study. And then for her mother's body, she wrapped that in a sleeping bag and just hid it in an upstairs wardrobe. So do you see the differences? So first of all, she poisoned her father, which I guess in her mind was a quick and quiet death. And then she literally took time to get masonry blocks and build a mausoleum in his study and then buried him in there. With her mother, she smashed her up, stabbed her up, and then just wrapped her in a sleeping bag and threw her in her closet. Now, what did she have against her mother? Was she like a daddy's girl? Did she resent her mother? Like, that's really weird. Now, onto her plan of, pretending her parents were still alive. She would send text messages from her mother's phone. For instance, right after the murder, she texted one of her siblings, quote, "Your dad and I are at the seaside in Walton this week. Mum, X." So I guess that's how she would the mother would sign it, Mum X. So she would just send out random text messages, telling the children we're good, or telling her, Virginia's uncles, which is the mom's brothers, that she was good, blah, blah, blah. Then she would impersonate her mom on phone calls to the parents' doctors and to the bank. Then she would send out birthday cards during each kid's birthday or family member's birthday, and she would use pre-printed birthday cards and have that mailed to each person. So it was never like the mother was writing it, but it was pre-printed birthday cards. And whenever anybody asked to come and visit, she would make up like elaborate excuses as to why, not right now. I don't know, I'm washing my hair and that's going to take 48 hours. I have to shampoo the carpet downstairs and that's going to take about 3 to 5 business days. Those 2 things, the shampoo and hair and the carpet, I'm making it up because they didn't leave any examples of the elaborate excuses that she would use. And I can't figure out, other than we're not home, but like how many times can you use the we're not home excuse? What excuse would get people to stay away? So I just had to make something up. Then what helped her out even more was that's when COVID-19 hit. So lockdowns are now in place, so you can't come visit. And then, you could just say, oh, we're sickly, the father had diabetes, so they're vulnerable individuals. You can't come visit. So that was making it even easier for her. Now, with her parents gone, Virginia was able to embezzle $149,697, well, not dollars, pounds, from their accounts. She spent 21,000 pounds on gambling, and then she would buy like expensive plants, cinnamon buns, and just other unnecessary things. Like, ma'am, how many cinnamon buns do you need? I'm sorry. You could just go to the store and you could buy the one that you put in the oven, the pop-up one. What does it come in, like 12 or something like that? You just pop open the tube and put that in the oven. Yes, it's a bunch of chemicals, but you know, if you wanted that many cinnamon buns, rather than spending 149,000 pounds, like, you could just get the ones from the store. Wait, actually, in England, do y'all have those? It's like, it's a tube of dough, and you unwrap it, it pops. You keep unwrapping it, and it's just dough, and you're supposed to separate the dough on a cookie sheet, and then you put it in the oven and bake it. Do y'all have that in England? However, all good things come to an end, and I use that term very wryly because this is bullshit that she did that to her parents and then just stealing from them. Her story started falling apart in September 2023. This was because the parents' doctor hadn't seen them at all. Yeah, COVID and everything like that, but they were still doing virtual appointments, or you could still come in one by one. Either way, they hadn't seen the father or the mother at all, which the father, he needs his blood pressure medicine, he needs his diabetes medicine, and speaking of medicine, no one was picking up the medications. So it's like you're missing doctor's appointment, you're not picking up your medicine. You know, we need to do a wellness check because that's what a good doctor does. So they reported this, and then the Essex County Council safeguarding team referred the case to the police on September 13th, 2023, who then launched a missing persons investigation. They called Virginia, who told them that her parents were traveling and would return in October. But police quickly noticed inconsistencies with this statement. When they were around talking to people, they got reports that literally no one had seen John or Lois for the last 4 years. Neighbors were saying community events that they usually come to, they didn't go to in 4 years, maybe miss a year, but this is something that you continuously did, and we just don't see you anymore for 4 years. And then when they're still talking to Virginia about this, like I know you said they're coming back in October, she had different overlapping and conflicting stories about where her parents were. Then in doing more investigations, they noticed suspicious financial activities in their bank accounts. So on September 15th, 2023, police got a search warrant and forced entry into the McCullough home. Body cam footage captured the moments when officers confronted Virginia, and instead of denying anything, she immediately confessed. Quote, "I did know this would kind of come eventually. It's proper that I serve my punishment." So police were like, huh? And she said, "Oh, yeah, the bodies of my parents, they're in the house." She said, quote, "I know why you're here. My father is in there. I murdered him." So police went and found her father's body in a, quote, makeshift tomb in a downstairs room, which we said that was in his study, while they found her mother was hidden in a wardrobe upstairs. And Virginia even corrected an officer for using the term, quote, cupboard instead of, quote, wardrobe, when referring to where she hid her mother's body. Quote, "She's upstairs in a double wardrobe." So after they found the bodies, which by this time, 4 years, they're kind of mummified, then Virginia led them to the murder weapons. In describing it, officers said she showed no remorse while she was telling them, quote, "The knife used to stab my mom is underneath the stairs. It will still have blood on it." Police said she never cried. She remained calm. She walked them around as if she was just showing them, and this is the entryway. And what do you think of that chandelier? This is how she was walking around showing them where her father and her mother's body was and the murder weapons and everything like that. And then after all of that, as if they couldn't think that it would get any worse than this, she goes, quote, "Cheer up. At least you've caught the bad guy." She also said, quote, "I did know this day would come eventually. I deserve to get what's coming, sentence-wise, because that's the right thing to do. And then that might give me a bit of peace." Finally, she informed police about a bank card in her purse that she'd been using after her parents' death. She told officers that she had been making transactions from her parents' bank accounts also. Detective Superintendent Rob Kirby later described her as, quote, "an intelligent manipulator who lied about almost every aspect of her life." Police made another realization that they had been to the address less than a month before on August 18th, 2023. This was because Virginia had called and alleged that she'd been assaulted. A female police officer interviewed her, but, obviously she was unaware of the bodies in the house. So she interviewed Virginia and then she left. So when the department did a review of this police officer, they found that she didn't do anything wrong, which obviously. But my question is, how did she hide the smell? I guess her father was in a tomb, but her mother was just wrapped in a sleeping bag. How did she hide that smell? At Chelmsford Crown Court on July 4th, 2024, Virginia pled guilty to both murders. The prosecution's case against her focused on portraying her as a calculated and manipulative individual who killed her parents for financial gain and then went to great lengths to conceal her crimes. Which to me sounds about right. They wanted to prove her guilt to secure a conviction and argued that her actions warranted a severe sentence. So what they focused on was her stealing from her parents and securing loans in their names without their knowledge. They also said she made up stories about financial losses, claiming that her parents were victims of fraud, banking failures, or hackers, and even invented police and corporate investigations. So this was all while her parents were alive, and, I guess maybe whenever they saw money missing, this is what she would say, "Oh, a hacker or a banking failure or fraud. Oh, the police are investigating this," stuff like that. The prosecution noted that she spent over 21,000 pounds on online gambling and ultimately, as I told you before, got the 149,697 pounds from her parents. Well, not got, but stole. And the prosecution said that these murders were committed to prevent her parents from discovering the thefts and to continue accessing their money. And they also told the court that by the time of the murders, so before she murdered them, she was almost 60,000 pounds in debt. The prosecution then went into the premeditation and the planning of the murders because it's like she tested the poisons out first. She tested it out first. She planned everything. And she even had a backup plan to use weapons if the poison had failed. They also pointed out the brutality of which she murdered her mother and the callous way she discarded her mother. And in really hitting the point home in that this was a premeditated murder, they pointed out that she maintained this for over 4 years, where she lied to family, friends, medical staff, and, sending text messages, phone calls, the birthday cards, the gift cards, all of this that, was perpetuating that her parents were alive. They also pointed out that right after she murdered her parents, she sent that text, like I said, to one of her sister's phones. So after she murdered them, she's sending out texts, making sure that people think that they're not even home, giving her time to build a makeshift tomb and do all of that stuff. That same night that she had murdered her parents, she also sent one of her other siblings a text that said, quote, "Good night, Mom, X." Then they ended saying that Virginia's actions amounted to a gross violation of trust as she abused her position as her parents' daughter and caregiver. And they said that her parents should have felt safe in their own home. They also pointed out that she had a complete lack of remorse, noting her callous behavior after the murder. They said that all this time, even up until this trial, she had a, quote, "dark sense of humor," and that she showed, look at her, completely no emotion during the court proceedings. The only time she cried was when she heard the description of how she murdered her mother. That's literally it. They also pointed out that weeks before the body was discovered, she invited police into her home to discuss assault allegations, like I told you before, and prosecutors said this was possibly to test the waters to see if police suspected her at all. And they also brought up evidence that she made 238 calls to the Essex police between July 2020 up until her arrest for a variety of trivial matters. Prosecution said this was likely because she was becoming paranoid. And like I said, when she called the police the 2 weeks before she was arrested, he thinks that was to see if they even suspected her of anything. Prosecution also said that she made 185 calls to the GP, the general practice, the doctor, surgery, including calls in which she pretended to be her mother. And, Your Honor, to wrap this up, I just want to leave you with a quote that she told police when they came to her house and they found that she had murdered her parents. She said, quote, "Cheer up, at least you've caught the bad guy." This is what the prosecution read out in court because they wanted the judge to hear that quote. Now, the defense, because, they can't just be like, well, yeah, she's guilty, defense arrest, Your Honor. The defense, they didn't deny that she did commit the murders, but they tried to portray her as someone who was influenced by mental health issues, caregiving pressures, and an acceptance of guilt. They wanted to mitigate the severity of her sentence, specifically trying to avoid a life sentence and secure a minimum term that would allow for the possibility of parole. So they pointed out that Virginia's mental health was an issue. They said that there was evidence that she had developed symptoms of a personality disorder, that she was on the autism spectrum, and possibly had mild depression at the time of the murders. Okay, so what you're trying to tell me, sir, is she had a personality disorder, so I guess one of her personalities decided to murder her parents? Or are you trying to blame it on autism? She was autistic and that turns you into a murderer. Or are you trying to blame it on mild depression? So I'm mildly depressed, so that turned you. Like, what kind of, that's your mental health defense? They said, well, yeah, because these conditions, particularly her autism, might have affected her decision making, potentially leading her to believe that her only options were to live with her parents or kill them. Okay, I'm not autistic, but I do know some autistic people, and, no. If you're autistic, leave me a message, because tell me how much bullshit that defense was. If you're autistic or know someone who is autistic or even have autistic children, leave a comment below to let me know how bullshit that defense was. So even the defense was like, they kind of backpedaled. They're like, well, autism is not an excuse, but I'm just saying it might explain her actions to some degree, Your Honor. No? Yes? No? Then they said, okay, well, let's look at the caregiver status. Her parents both had physical and mental health issues, so this might have given her extreme stress or pressure. Does that defense work? No? Okay. So let's try this one. I mean, she did show remorse in that when police broke into her house, because, she wouldn't ever answer where her parents actually were. So the police had to get a warrant and break into the house. And when they came in, she immediately said, "I murdered them." So that showed remorse, right? And she told them where the bodies were, where the weapons were. She told them about the card. She gave them the PIN numbers and the passwords to all her digital devices, and she gave a quick admission of guilt to, quote, "prevent distress to John and Lois's family." So you got to take that into account, Your Honor. Then on top of that, when she came in here, she pled guilty. So that spared the family the pain of a trial. Like, they're doing a closed trial. This isn't a jury trial and everything like that. So that spared the family the pain of a trial. Correct, Your Honor? So all of this shows remorse and acceptance of her fate, right? So when you're doing your sentencing, Your Honor, you should take that into account, that she did plead guilty and she did immediately tell police what happened. And finally, Your Honor, in my closing statement, I want to point out that Virginia did show sorrow at the time of the murders, even though we weren't there. So I don't know how I got even this idea in my head that she showed sorrow. Maybe because she built her dad a mausoleum, but then she was so tired after building that she just wrapped her mom in some sleeping bags and dumped her in a closet. But clearly the fact that she wrapped her in sleeping bags means that she showed remorse. Again, all that I'm saying, they did suggest that she had shown sorrow at the time of the killings, though. And if somebody gets on me that I sat there and just said that whole thing, and you're like, oh my God, she made all that up. Yes, I did. If you don't like it, you don't have to listen to me, and don't waste your time leaving a negative review. Just don't listen to me. Go to somebody else who would say, it was suggested that she had shown sorrow at the time of the killings and that she was making productive use of her time in custody. They argued that she had accepted her sentence and was not using her mental health issues as an excuse for inaction. There are other people who narrate their cases that way. You don't have to listen. Anyway, back to what I was saying. So like I already said, they also said that while she was in custody, she was making productive use of her time. And this showed that she was sorry about what she did, which I don't know how. What productive use of her time? How do you make up for murdering your parents? Show me what productive use of her time was she doing in custody when literally she's in custody. She has nothing else to do. What about the 4 years? The 4 years she had, what productive use of her time was she doing in those 4 years to show sorrow? Instead, she was spending their money and covering her tracks. But now that she's in custody, now she shows remorse by using her time wisely. Like, are you kidding me? And like I said, they argued that she had accepted her sentence and she wasn't using the mental health issues as an excuse. But we are, Your Honor. We're using mental health as an excuse, but she's not. So that's our closing arguments, Your Honor, and the defense rests. So during sentencing on October 11th, 2024, Mr. Justice Jeremy Johnson said, quote, "Your actions were a gross violation of the trust that should exist between parents and their children." He said that Virginia valued money over human life and called her deception a, quote, "monumental scale of betrayal." The judge agreed that the murders were motivated by Virginia's desire to prevent her parents from discovering her thieving and to also continue accessing their finances. He acknowledged that she did conceal her parents' bodies for a long time, which is over 4 years, and he called this a substantial aggravating factor. He said this robbed them of dignity in death and increased the suffering of her siblings. He also took into account the fact that she used a hammer and a knife to murder her mother, and while she did exhibit symptoms of a personality disorder, autism, and possibly mild depression, he said her mental health did not substantially reduce her culpability because she understood her conduct and was able to make rational judgments. Then he allowed some victim impact statements, which the family of John and Lois released a joint statement expressing that they were, quote, "devastated and heartbroken at the death of our parents who were taken from us so cruelly." They emphasized that the love and the joy that their parents had brought into their lives would now be missed. Lois's brother, Richard Butcher, called Virginia, quote, "very dangerous," stating that her actions, quote, "undermined my faith in humanity," is what he said. One of Virginia's siblings wrote, quote, "You have left a hole in my heart forever. A piece of me died with them the day you took them away from us." Another of her siblings said, quote, "They were horrified and heartbroken because of Virginia. We have been robbed of time and the loving bonds with our mom and dad for years to come. How dare she, Virginia, rob our family of this right? We are orphans due to this abhorrent and heinous actions for which she is solely responsible." Richard Butcher also said that he lost 2 close relatives because of Virginia's actions. He felt manipulated because he believed he was in communication with Lois and John and Virginia before learning the truth. He also said, quote, "I can never get this time back with my sister and her husband." He also said, quote, "Virginia is very dangerous. Her ability to kill her parents undermines my faith in humanity, he said. My biggest fear is that Virginia is dangerous and she will now have a lot of time to plan something else. The judge initially considered a life sentence without parole due to the premeditated nature of the murders and the number of victims, but opted for a minimum term order after considering the mitigating circumstances. Basically, what he considered was her immediate admission to the police and the fact that she did plead guilty and avoided a whole public trial. So because of that, the judge imposed a minimum term of 36 years, less spent on remand, which reduced it to 34 years and 341 days. Which means, basically, that Virginia was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 34 years and 341 days. She won't be eligible for parole until October 3rd, 2059. The judge then left her with a closing remark that said, quote, "Your parents were entitled to feel safe in their own beds, in their own home, and with their own daughter. Instead, you took their lives in the most brutal way possible." Following the sentencing, Detective Superintendent Rob Kirby described Virginia as an intelligent manipulator who killed her parents callously. The Crown Prosecution Service said the case was, quote, "truly disturbing" and had, quote, "left behind a trail of devastation." What did you think of that craziness? Can you imagine? She murdered her parents. She practiced how to do it, then murdered them, then just lived with their body for over 4 years, just stealing their money. What was your plan when they ran out of money? Money runs out, you know. What was your plan? But I guess she said exactly what she meant to say. She was just having a fun ride while it lasted, and she knew this day was going to come. So she didn't have a plan. She was just living life 1/4 mile at a time. And that's all she was doing. The craziness, and then the defense with their, she's autistic, so, she might not have known are you kidding the frick out of me? Like, really? Ugh. Anyway, that was the case of Virginia McCullough. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I can't even with this case. I just can't even. Before I wrap up, I want to remind you that you can become a sponsor of Love and Murder by joining our Patreon, patreon.com/Love and Murder. Just go over there, read up on the tiers that I offer to see what bonuses that you want, and select whichever tier aligns with what you're looking for, and you can become a sponsor of Love and Murder. If you're not ready to become a sponsor, you can still become a free lamb Patreon, and you still get benefits by doing that. Patreon.com/Love and Murder. The reason I'm telling you to go over to Patreon, or you could actually become a member of my new Substack newsletter, loveandmurder.substack.com, but the link is in the show notes below also, is because I'm kind of veering away from social media, because whenever I post stuff on social media, not many people are seeing it, or they block it for stupid reasons. So it's just like my social media to me is not getting to you. You're not getting all my posts. You're not getting my questions. Even when I post on Spotify, I'm not getting your responses sometimes, or I'm not able to post the polls, or. So I'm trying to get everybody to just come over to my Patreon, where you'll get everything in there, because it comes directly to your email whenever I post anything. So you'll be able to see it in your email. Even in my Substack, you'll be able to see it in your email. So these are the best places if you want reminders of the show, if you want to get your comments heard, if you want to participate in the poll. You could sign up for the Patreon. You could sign up for the free option. You don't have to pay for it. So you can sign up for the free option, patreon.com/Love and Murder. But if you want to be a sponsor, feel free. Or to the newsletter, Substack, which goes to your email. And with the newsletter, I only send out one weekly newsletter, but I also am going to have other posts that you can go in there and see. Like, if you want more than just one weekly newsletter, go in my Substack and you'll have like different posts in there, different cases, stuff like that. But I won't be like bombarding your email with messages. Just one message a week from me. So that's all I have for you for today's episode. And as I end each full week's episode, I want to remind you that it's, say it with me now, all love and no murder, y'all. Stay tuned for my commercial guests, and I will also see you in the next episode. Bye.
On Wiki Travel, the Pacific Northwest is best known for its beautiful coastline, green interior, rainy weather, and spectacular mountains. But because of all this, it's also the perfect place to go missing. My name's Carmita, and I grew up in the Pacific Northwest in Portland, Oregon. I host a podcast called Missing in the PNW. My podcast is different from others you may have heard because I focus specifically on two things. The first is that all of the missing person cases that I cover are strictly from the Pacific Northwest in Oregon and Washington. I know, the title of my podcast should have given that one away. The second thing is that my podcast focuses strictly on missing persons from marginalized communities, such as the Black, Hispanic, Native American and Indigenous people, and the LGBTQ plus communities. You know, the ones that get absolutely no media attention. Now, I am not an investigative journalist or a reporter. I'm actually a widowed mom of 3 who loves true crime and has a passion for social justice. So join me in helping to spread the word on these missing person cases and help be the voice for the ones that are now voiceless. You can find Missing in the PNW on all of the major streaming apps, as well as on socials at Missing in the PNW Podcast. If you have a case you want me to cover, please email me at missinginthepnw@gmail.com or send me a message through Facebook Messenger. I hope to talk to you soon. And remember, have fun, but be safe.